Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Shauna Kiseki, and I work at the Southwest Wisconsin Library System. I am the Outreach and Continuing Education Consultant here at SWLS, and today's webinar will be recorded. If you're joining us live, I welcome you to ask questions by using the chat box or the Q&A button if you'd like. I'll be keeping an eye on those today. And if you're watching this recording, I welcome you to contact me at SWLS with questions. And if you'd like captions, please click on the Show Captions button, which should be found. You can find that at the lower bar of the Zoom screen. And today we're gathering for part 3 of our series on local history questions. Where do you start? Today we're excited to have Kristen Whitson here from WiLS and Recollection Wisconsin. And with that, Kristen, are you ready?
I sure am. Does everybody feel ready to talk about digitizing and accessing local history?
Yes.
I think everybody's ready. Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here, and thanks Shauna and Southwest Wisconsin Library System for having me. This is the third in the series after Jen Shampoo shared information about researching with local newspapers last week, and then 2 weeks ago, Jill Fuller from the Wisconsin Historical Society shared about local genealogy resources. So I'm here to talk a little bit about how all of those resources get into those places. I hear a lot from public libraries and historical societies about wanting to digitize their local history materials. So that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. I'm also going to talk about Recollection Wisconsin and how it works, and what the search sort of path looks like. So I'll share that all with you. And as Shauna said, please feel free to pop questions in the chat. She's going to stop me, as needed with questions. So send them in whenever you have them. So as Shauna said, I work for WiLS, which is Wisconsin Library Services, and I help on several different projects. One of those projects is Recollection Wisconsin that we're talking about today. And some of you may have heard of Recollection Wisconsin, but just so we kind of start on the same page, let's talk about what it is that we do. Recollection Wisconsin brings together digital cultural heritage resources from Wisconsin libraries, archives, museums, and historical societies and shares them with the world. So what that really means is that we guide local history organizations, and that includes libraries that have local history collections, through the process of bringing their historical collections online. We aggregate them and we share them with the world through Recollection Wisconsin and the Digital Public Library of America. Stick with me, I'm going to demonstrate what that looks like and why that is important or interesting. It's important to note that we don't actually hold those digital resources. We work remotely, we don't have a server. What we do is harvest those resources into one central place so that they can be accessed all from a central location. And again, I will show you what that means. But really, one of our primary jobs is to elevate the historical resources that our partners care for. So that collection right now, currently, looks like over 700,000 metadata records in a central search portal. And that includes photos, maps, books, artifacts, oral histories, letters, postcards, etc. Almost anything you can think of, we can harvest into the central collection. And these materials are used by researchers, students, teachers, genealogists, librarians, curious folks from all over. This is widely available. It's not a licensed resource. It's free and open to the public. And the collection is an aggregation of historical content from over 250 organizations across the state. I think last count when I put this together a couple of weeks ago was 259 libraries, archives, historical societies, museums, and government agencies. These over 250 organizations contribute around 430, a little over, distinct collections. And most of them are state and local history materials, but some of our content partners like UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee contribute materials from across the country and around the world. So we've got all kinds of things that are searchable in that central collection. So Recollection Wisconsin is the Digital Public Library of America service hub in our state. And I'm going to show you what that means in just a moment. It means we serve as a pathway or a pipeline for Wisconsin libraries, archives, and museums to contribute their unique collections to DPLA. So DPLA has all of this unique content specifically from Recollection Wisconsin. There are hubs, just like Recollection Wisconsin, in most of the states throughout the country. So I think there's maybe 40 or 43 other hubs of DPLA in each state or a collection of states that are doing the same thing that Recollection Wisconsin is doing. And we're feeding that all up into the Digital Public Library of America. So DPLA aims to amplify the value of libraries and cultural organizations as Americans' most trusted sources of shared knowledge. That's really their mission statement. And DPLA does this by collaborating with a national network of partners just like us to make millions of materials from libraries, archives, museums, and other cultural institutions across the country available to all in a one-stop discovery experience. So now I want to show you what that looks like. So this is Recollection Wisconsin's website. You can see, I think you can probably see this. Let me check my little preview. Yes, you can. You can see the Recollection Wisconsin website. When you come to our website, you can either search the collection up here in the right-hand search box, which we are going to do in just a moment. But I want to show you how I often navigate this. If I want to look by partner in Recollection Wisconsin, I go to the Browse by Partner because I like to see who all in the state is contributing to Recollection Wisconsin. So there's a map here, which can be really helpful. There's also an alphabetical list with links here to every single organization's library, historical society, museum, to all of their collections. So if you want to look at just what the Grant County Historical Society has in their collection, you can click on their page. It will go directly to their collection here. And this is how you can see just one organization's collection. There's a few click-throughs here. This is everything that the Grant County Historical Society has in Recollection, Wisconsin. Okay, so that's one way to search the collections. But let me show you how we typically, the value of having a central search portal like this. So let's say we're doing Soldiers Grove, which is a municipality I think you all are probably familiar with. So if we're searching in Recollection, Wisconsin for anything having to do with Soldiers Grove, we search here and we see that there's 31 results. And you can see where these are all coming from. University of Wisconsin Digital Collections, the University of Wisconsin La Crosse has a picture of Soldiers Grove High School. The Winding Rivers Library System has some materials. There's a Richland County history room. And when we're searching for Soldiers Grove, we're picking up anything that has Soldiers Grove in the description, subject, keynotes. The Department of Public Instruction has some materials. So this is anything that mentions Soldiers Grove, right? So the thing I want you to remember is that searching just in Recollection, Wisconsin, that's just our hub, we have 31 results, okay? So let's go up to the DPLA level, which is the national level with all of the hubs, just like Recollection, Wisconsin. Let's search Soldiers Grove here. Now we have 328 results for Soldiers Grove. And that's because everything just like we saw in our first 31 items results came in. So we still have here the University of Wisconsin Digital Collections, UW La Crosse, but we've also got other content providers. So for some reason, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Library has something that has to do with Soldiers Grove. Now this Soldiers Home Grove might not actually be our Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin, but you're picking up more information from other places throughout the country. And this is the really the value of participating in Recollection Wisconsin and in DPLA is that you're finding materials from other places that may be relevant that you might not be able to find just on a statewide level. So I'm going to go back to my slides here and give you a little bit more information as I'm talking about it. So for instance, something more common that I have seen is that, so let's say somebody grew up in Door County, right? And they have a whole bunch of materials related to their childhood in Door County or Prairie du Chien or anywhere else in Wisconsin. And then they move to Montana or California. They make a whole life for themselves in a whole nother state. And then towards the end of their life, they donate their materials to their local historical society, who then digitizes and put those materials up online. And so now you've got something, about a childhood in Prairie du Chien that is coming from a DPLA hub all the way out in Montana or California. And that's the value of central search aggregation. So I'm over explaining a central search and aggregation point to all of you. Librarians know how to make that happen and what the value is. But that's what we do at Recollection Wisconsin, is help get those materials into Recollection Wisconsin so then they can feed up into DPLA. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's questions. Great, good. Feel free to chime in with those if you've got them. Let me tell you a little bit about the community that runs this whole business. So we have, as I said, 259 content partners, and those are libraries, historical societies, archives all over the state. We have 6 organizations that are part of our governing board. We have a steering committee that sort of helps guide what we're doing. And then we have an education advisory committee that helps inform the K-12 outreach efforts. We're putting all of this material into Recollection Wisconsin, so we want to be sure that it's being well used, especially by educators. That's a key sort of audience for the materials that we're putting in Recollection Wisconsin. These are our governing partners, just so you have an idea of who it is kind of behind the consortium. So the top 6 here, Milwaukee Public Library, Marquette University, the Wisconsin Historical Society, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, UW-Madison, and UW-Milwaukee. Each one of them sits on our governing board and makes, financial decisions and policy decisions for us. They provide some in-kind expertise and some work for us. So like UW-Madison does the aggregation of our metadata for us. We work with Milwaukee Public Library to do some hosting. So I'll explain more about what that is. And then WiLS is the project manager. And most of you are probably familiar with WiLS, but just in case, to explain what that is, WiLS, Wisconsin Library Services, is a private nonprofit, but we serve the library community. So we project manage the WPLC and the WSDLC. We handle your electronic book collections. There's several other consortia that WiLS helps to manage, and one of them is Recollection Wisconsin. So I'm a WiLS employee, but Recollection Wisconsin pays WiLS to manage the project, and I'm assigned to that project. So that's how we all kind of come together there. So because we are, in the business of helping folks get their materials digitized and put online, we spend a decent amount of time teaching folks how to do that, talking about content hosting. We talk about guidelines and standards, how it is that you digitize materials and how you get them online. So we are a resource to help libraries, archives, historical societies, and museums bring their unique historical collections online in a standardized way using nationally recognized best practices. We have a freely available online digital readiness toolkit. And when we send the slides out for this afterwards, the links to the digital readiness toolkit will be included in the slides. And that toolkit provides guidance for all stages of a digitization project, from selection and copyright to metadata and digital preservation. We work with Milwaukee Public Library to host digital collections for smaller resources. Again, we're getting to that. And we are coordinating with the South Central Library System and other library systems to provide basic digitization kits to all of the library systems in the state. So I'm pleased to tell you that Southwest Wisconsin Library System does have a digitization kit available for borrowing, and I will leave it to Shauna to talk about how that works. You all can get in touch with her afterwards if you would like to borrow that digitization kit. But overall, our goal is really to build a network of expertise and resources, really a community of practice to provide libraries with the support that they need to digitize, share, and preserve the histories of their communities. I like to answer this question like pretty upfront before we talk about the process a little bit. And thanks, Shauna, for putting that into the chat. Please email her about the use of the digitization kit if you would like to. So a lot of times folks are like, okay, this sounds great. You're gonna like help me digitize things and you're gonna put them online for me. And how much does that cost? And I'm very pleased to say that the state funds us. And so we were fortunate to be put into the state budget in 2023. We are just now coming up on our renewal of the state budget here in 2025. And as long as the state continues to fund us, we don't have any intention of charging libraries or content partners for this assistance. It's something that the taxpayers pay us for, and it's a state service. So as long as the state funding continues, this does not cost anything for you all to scan and or digitize and put into Recollection Wisconsin your local history collections. We do always like to demonstrate the value of Recollection Wisconsin's value to the statewide digital collections community. So if you do end up, participating, or you already participate, or you know that this is a service that you or your patrons are using, we love to hear those stories because it helps us talk to the legislators about why it's so important to continue to fund us. So that answers the cost question, which is always a big question up front. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit of how this actually happens. So let's say you're at a library, you're at your own library, and you have a collection of postcards or photographs that you would like to scan and share online. We have a couple of different options for that. So you scan all those things at your library, and if your library has, I don't think most of the materials in Southwest Wisconsin library system or libraries have their own content management system. But let's say a library has something called a content management system, and they host it themselves and they upload it into their own content management system. We can just harvest the metadata from that content management system. And that means we're not actually pulling in the literal digital file itself. All we're doing is basically creating kind of an equation where we bring in a copy of the metadata into Recollection Wisconsin. So then the metadata is searchable alongside all of the other metadata. And then that metadata feeds up into the Digital Public Library of America. So that's one way that we do it. And there's some library systems like Prairie Lakes Library System or Winnifox Library System. They have their own content management systems. They do all of the uploading of their materials, and then we just harvest those materials. And the reason we set up a harvest is because once a quarter, we run that harvest again, meaning that anything that is updated in that quarter, anything that's added or deleted, metadata changed, we pull that update in every 3 months. So that's when it shows up in Recollection Wisconsin and then in DPLA. The other option for libraries, historical societies, archives, museums, that don't have their own content management system is for us to host that ourselves. And we do that by using some of that state funding money to pay or assist in the cost sharing for a content management system that Milwaukee Public Library has and hosts for the entire state. And this is how about, I would say 60 or 70% of our content partners get their materials online. So they have a content management system called Content DM. And they have all of the digital space that is available for that. What happens is that we at Recollection Wisconsin then teach content partners, like any of you at your libraries, we teach you how to get those materials digitized, and how to upload the materials and the metadata into Content DM. And once it's in Content DM, then we harvest from Content DM every quarter. And so same thing, any additions, subtractions, deletions, updates, those all get pulled in from then Content DM that's hosted at the Milwaukee Public Library once a quarter. Does that all make sense? Does anybody have questions about that? It's a pretty quick overview of the entire process. So I wanted to see if anybody had questions about how this works. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit slowly. So if you're typing in the chat, please feel free to keep doing that. And I'm happy to answer questions about this process too. So I mentioned that toolkit, and actually, I think I am just going to put this into the chat because I want you to be able to take a look at the toolkit as needed. Because we are helping organizations get, hang on just a second, I can't type and talk at the same time. It's the Digital Readiness Toolkit, but we call it the Doctor Toolkit because of its abbreviation. So I just put a link into the chat. The Digital Readiness Toolkit has guidance in the areas of a lot of questions that we have gotten over the years, including how to plan a project, what obtaining permissions looks like, what best practices are for digitizing, metadata guidelines and templates. Recollection Wisconsin has a whole metadata essentials document, what the options are for sharing. So that same flowchart that I just showed you, we go through that in more detail, evaluating the effectiveness of a project. And I will say that the project planning worksheet, we have a project planning worksheet that is part of that Digital Readiness Toolkit, is really kind of the best place to start. It guides you through all of the questions that we think you should either have the answers to or at least be thinking about before you start a digitization project. You don't have to know the answers to those questions. And in fact, it's probably best to go through that project planning worksheet with other members of your community or colleagues within the library. But it's a really good way to start thinking about the feasibility of a digitization project before you get started. Okay. Let's have a brief moment to talk about newspapers because this is a very common question that we get. Thank you, Janelle. I think I just put it in thanks, Shauna. Shauna shared it with everybody. I had accidentally just shared it with the hosts and panelists. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, let's talk about newspapers for a moment. So I get this question a lot, especially because newspapers the newspapers are a really common thing that a lot of libraries want to digitize. So it is possible to digitize and share newspapers with Recollection Wisconsin, but it is pretty difficult and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So the short answer is that we don't have a great solution for where to put newspapers online right now. We're working on a better solution, but for right now, this is not ideal. But let me tell you why that is. The hosting solution that we use, that Content DM content management system that I mentioned, it doesn't do a great job with huge amounts of text. And the storage that goes along with it, the digital storage that goes along with it, is very expensive. So we don't have the ability on our own to put newspapers into that Milwaukee Public Library hosted instance of Content DM. The content management system that does the best with newspapers is something called ResCarta, and we can harvest from ResCarta, no problem. It is a free and open source piece of software, but it requires a decent amount of tech support or know-how to use. And we currently do not have an instance of ResCarta that we as Recollection Wisconsin use or can provide access to for everybody else in the state. There are a couple of library systems that do have it and use it because they have dedicated tech support to it. Winnifox Library System is one of those, Prairie Lakes Library System. if, you know, so within those systems, they have newspapers that they scan and upload and put into ResCarta, and those can handle newspapers. We would all much prefer, I think, to have a centralized place for newspapers. And the newspapers that Jen Shampoo talked about last week that are in the Archive of Wisconsin Newspapers, those were from a specific limited time historical newspaper project that there was money for it. Those newspapers were scanned. They were put into the Archive of Wisconsin Newspapers, and it was a really finite collection. So that's how those got there. But we don't, those do not connect with the Recollection Wisconsin, system. They're not searchable at the same time. And I think everybody in the state would prefer to have a central search and access point for all of the state's newspapers. So ideally what will happen is that in the years to come, the Wisconsin Historical Society will be the place that all of those newspapers go, including the ones that we have from Recollection Wisconsin, and newspapers yet to come. Their new digital asset management system should be able to handle that. But again, that's a few years off. If there's an urgent need or interest, I shouldn't even say urgent, if there's an interest in digitizing and putting online newspapers in your communities, I would love to hear about it. It helps us understand the level of demand for a newspaper digitization and hosting solution in the meantime before the Wisconsin Historical Society is able to get to that point. They're just onboarding their new digital asset management system. So I would love to hear about that if that is something that you all are interested in. Any questions about newspapers? Or feel free to speak up if there's newspapers already digitized in your community or if there has been an interest in a newspaper digitization program.
Thanks, Kristen. I don't see any in the Q&A yet.
Okay. I'm going to leave some time for us towards the end, which is going to be in actually not too much longer here. I'm going to talk for a little bit longer, and then I would love to hear from all of you about your interest in digitization projects, not just newspapers, but anything through Ancestry. Okay. I want to talk about that in just a second too. I would love to hear about anything that you all are thinking of digitizing and putting online in terms of local history projects, and any specific questions that I can answer for those. So that's a little little teaser for the kind of discussion I'd love to have at the end here. Yeah, Ancestry is a really good point. So a lot of times what happens with Ancestry is that that is a company that they've provided a lot of newspapers, which is wonderful. They and other companies come around and digitize newspapers, and then the digital files belong to them, and they're not in the hands of the local libraries or organizations, from my understanding. And that's okay. It just is a continually, needs to be licensed resource that, the state or somebody needs to pay for you all to be able to access them. And so a lot of times we get historical societies or libraries who would like to do it on their own to keep the digital files of the newspapers within their own community. That doesn't mean that it has to be the way that it goes. I think the vision long term is for there to be one place for all of the Wisconsin newspapers to be searchable. And if you went to Jen's presentation last week, you saw that there's several places where Wisconsin newspapers are can be found. So I know that can be a challenge. Newspapers.com. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So one more thing that I want to tell you about that is a resource for all of you. The Recollection Wisconsin Digitization Initiative is something that's available to help with digitization. And we just started this in the fall of 2024. So we're only in our second semester. And this is really a pilot year where we're trying this out, and it seems to be going well so far. So what we're doing with some of that wonderful state funding is that we are hiring student interns by semester and paying them for their work, because so often these student internships and practicums are not paid, which is kind of the way it goes, but we have some funds to pay them, so we do. We're hiring them to fan out across the state and go to organizations just for digitization and metadata work. So, you know, like at the computer, scanning for a semester, writing the metadata to go along with those things, with the materials then coming into Recollection Wisconsin at the end of the semester. And we're doing 3 to 4 to 5 students and host sites per semester. And the application process is on the Recollection Wisconsin website. We do have most of our sites and students chosen for summer 2025 so far. We are going to, we can still take applications for summer 2025. And even if you think you might not be quite ready for an intern in summer 2025, we'd still actually love to hear from you. Again, same thing with the newspapers. It tells us more about what the demand is for this kind of program in the future. We are taking a planned hiatus from the program in the fall of 2025, just to have a little bit of time to sort of pull together all of the everything that we've learned from the first semester and make any changes that we want to make to the program. But as long as we continue to get state funding, we intend to maintain or even expand this program. Recollection Wisconsin has been around for 10 or 12 years, and our predecessor organization was around for several years before that. And so all of the places that have the resources to do digitization projects on their own really have been done. It's now at the point where we need to provide some assistance for those organizations that don't have the time, money, equipment in some cases, and resources to be doing this digitization on their own. So that's really what this program is meant to get to. What else do I want to say about this? Please, like I said, please do apply for the, for the summer program if you would like to. And what we ask of host sites is that they have a place for a student to go to. And so far we're hiring students from UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee, but some of those are remote students throughout the state. So we've got students all over the state. That a host site has a place for them to go on a regular basis, whatever that is, that they have equipment or can purchase equipment with some guidance or have a digitization kit that can be used. And then we do all of the hiring, the matching, the paying. We pay for their travel costs. We help them and a host site plan for a digitization project. We get sort of everything ready for the student to be in the place to just sit down and do the scanning and metadata work, if that all makes sense. All right, let me check the chat here. Would you consider paying senior interns, retired folks? Yes, absolutely, Claudia. This is such a good question. So this is part of what we're looking at during that hiatus semester that we're taking in this fall, is expanding this beyond just practicum students. Now, the reason that so far we've picked practicum students is because we're narrowly keeping this to scanning and metadata work. And our hope is that the students who have been part of the archives program at either one of those schools have some experience with scanning and metadata, so that their semester is focused mostly on doing and not so much on learning. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that we can't have a similar type of program where we teach senior interns, retired folks who have an interest, how to do those things if they don't already know them. And then place them in local organizations, potentially for longer than just a semester. If we're talking about not students, the schedule doesn't have to be the same. And it can take longer to teach sort of metadata skills, but that doesn't mean it's not teachable. We all learned how to do metadata and cataloging. And so that doesn't mean that we can't teach it. It just would be on a different schedule. So that's a great idea, Claudia. We're also thinking about undergraduate students, or maybe, high school students, or folks who are taking programs with, like they're doing degrees with, an online program. They live in the state, but they're doing their program somewhere else. The main thing that we want to do is make sure that it benefits, since we're using Wisconsin taxpayer money for this, we want to make sure that it benefits Wisconsin in some ways. So either Wisconsin students or Wisconsin libraries and organizations, or some combination of both of them. Yeah, really good question. So I realize we're a little bit early here, but that's actually it because, okay, good. Thank you. It says the application period is closed. We're still taking applications. Too many cooks in the kitchen. So I will go through and make sure that that is opened up. But we would love to hear from you if you're interested in something like that. And even if you can't fill out the application, feel free to just email me, which my email is right here, kristen@wils.org. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen because what I really would like to do is hear a little bit from you all about your interest in digital projects, sort of like what drew you here today, what you were thinking of, what kind of digitization projects you're thinking of doing in your communities. Yeah, Claudia's got a great question here while you all are thinking about that. So, yeah, the copy stand method actually isn't even old. Lots of folks use the copy stand method where you put a camera up above a location. And yes, it can be higher resolution than scans. You're absolutely right about all those things. So I will tell you, the reason we talk about scanners a fair amount is because they're more easy to understand and access for lots of folks who have never done digitization projects before. And part of what's really important to Recollection Wisconsin is that we make this process available and doable by as many people as possible. You know, all of us have a lot of professional experience with these things, but folks in little historical societies or maybe small public libraries that don't have like a local history librarian have never done this before, and we want them to be able to and not feel intimidated or overwhelmed by the process. And that is something that we've heard a ton of over the years. You know, folks start to figure out cataloging and they see the word metadata and they maybe panic a little bit because it just feels overwhelming. And a lot of the resources out there are from or for universities or huge historical societies. And it can be a lot. So the Digital Readiness Toolkit is written for folks who have maybe never done this before. And I'm sorry, this is a long answer to your question, Claudia, but that's why we talk about scanners more than copy stands and cameras. That doesn't mean somebody can't use a copy stand and camera and lights. Lots of our content partners do that. They use book scanners, sometimes like those, it's basically an overhead camera with lights and there's a foot pedal and you can just flip the book pages, which is really nice. Um, and the other thing I wanted to address was longevity, then a scan on a hard drive or in the cloud. Sure, yep, absolutely. And in the Digital Readiness Toolkit, we talk about digital preservation best practices, meaning how are you going to be able to access these materials a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years in the future. And the key to that is something that we call locks, lots of copies, keeps stuff safe, which means, yes, put a copy in the cloud for sure, but then put a copy on a hard drive, put a copy on your computer, update your hard drive, your external hard drive once a year, and then keep it locked in a safe. You know, keep your copies in the cloud updated. So yes, we absolutely teach information just like that. Really good question. That's a good question. Not off the top of my head, I don't, but I have several content partners who are I'm sorry, for the recording, I should read this. The question is, do you have info for copy stand equipment recommendations? There are several content partners that I know that use copy stands and cameras and lights. And one of the many projects that we continue to work on is a central place for folks to add their recommendations to each other. And if that's something that you're working on, I would love to hear what you're working on, Claudia, if you're planning on doing something like this. That I would be happy to put you in touch with one or more of those content partners. I just saw this. Claudia's next question, last question, she says, is Epson is pulling the plug on manufacturing and selling high-end scanners like the V850 Pro and the 13,000 XL film scanner. How do you suggest we plan for the future of equipment changes? This is a very good question. I just saw it, and I have to tell you, the archivist think tank group on Facebook is like all up in. Everybody uses the Epson V850 Pro. Like it's kind of like the classic scanner that a lot of sort of middle of the road archivists who don't have super big money use. And everybody's like kind of panicking about it a little bit. So the lower end Epson scanners, like the V600, yeah, buy them up on eBay for sure. The lower end V600 is actually a super serviceable scanner. It's really, really good. There's no reason that you can't get the V600 and use it, in my opinion and in my experience. I have not done enough research yet to know what everybody's using as alternatives, but suggesting for how do you suggest we plan for the future of equipment changes? I mean, I don't know that I have any solid suggestions. Look for them, buy them up on eBay, you know, have other options in your back pocket. The Caesar, as in CZUR, book scanners, I'm hearing super good things about, and those range from like $250 all the way up to several $1,000s. The other thing that helps with the few like equipment changes is when you build your own setup, like a copy stand and a camera and lights, because then it is more feasible to replace a component rather than the whole system altogether in a scanner. So those are the couple of probably not super helpful suggestions that I have.
These
Claudia,
were
are you
such great
working on
questions.
yeah, are you working on a project? I want to hear about what you're working on. Or anybody else's projects too.
Yeah, Claudia or anyone else, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, or you can use the chat. And I'm wondering, Kristen, what it looked like perhaps in other locations where, for example, folks have had like a day at the library where they've just asked people to come in and bring their ephemera. Has that been something that has been like a project with Recollection Wisconsin specifically? It seems like it would have been, but I know that there are libraries that have done that, and then, you know, not just done it for individuals, but tried to put those items in
The
another
library.
place too.
Yeah, that's a super good question. So we've talked about it. We haven't done it before, but libraries have done it on their own, and I'm going to explain why. So Recollection Wisconsin is sort of in a newer period of stability that came with that state funding that wasn't, we always knew that it's not like we were ever going to lose everybody's stuff because we don't actually hold it. Each organization has it. But for several years up until 2023, it was like every year, are we still going to get enough funding from private grants to be able to continue this project? So that said, there was not nearly as much outreach as there is now, I think, now that we are fairly stable moving forward. And so some of you, I'm sure I've seen you at SWAL, like in 2021, I think I spoke at SWAL, and Claudia reminded me, yes, because I've talked with Shan, yep, at the Mineral Point Library Archives. The copy stand idea is it's a really good idea. And so, you know, that's why I think you're probably hearing a little bit more from Recollection Wisconsin now. So all of that is to say, there are many libraries throughout the state, as you all probably know, that have a memory lab, maybe not memory, 10 or 20 libraries that have a memory lab where patrons can come in and digitize their own family materials. And a few of them have done community scan days that then become part of the library's collection. It just hasn't been a coordinated effort with Recollection Wisconsin. We would love to partner with you on that if that's something that any of the libraries are thinking of. You know, for people to know that if they come in and they want to share their materials with the world, they are welcome to do that. We can help, you know, make sure the library knows how to get those materials up into Recollection Wisconsin. I think the thing that would be important about that is to make sure that people know they don't have to do that. You know, like we don't want to put anybody's family materials online if they are not comfortable with that. That's not, there's no need to do that, you know? And so if a library wanted to put together a community scan day and that was an option to put them in Recollection Wisconsin, we would love to partner on that. And there's other libraries have done it, and so there's templates and, you know, event planning sort of guidelines that I'm sure we could work together on.
Great, thank you. That just seems like a natural idea. I'm wondering, yeah, if there are other folks who have had questions about this. I feel like Kristen's saying, we might have heard more about Recollection Wisconsin lately in the last few years, which is awesome, but how they can help and how it works. We have the person here. And I want to thank you, Kristen, for coming here today. This is, I've been wanting to have you here for a while. And yeah, I'm happy to help folks too. If you are wishing to coordinate something, you're looking for like templates, like Kristen's talking about. I'm imagining too, like if there was like a community scan day, there could easily be, you know, a form to sign, maybe.
Absolutely.
For example, I'm happy to help folks find things like that, materials that might help you.
Yeah. So of the, I have to tell you, of the 72 counties throughout Wisconsin, one of our goals for this year, the last couple of years and this year, is to have organizations in each one of the counties in Wisconsin. Of the 72 of them, we are missing only 8. And I think 2 of those counties, I'm gonna go look it up right now, are within the Southwest Wisconsin library system. So we really would love to work with you if you are thinking of, I mean, we would love to work with everybody in every county, of course. But if anybody is thinking of a particular project, let me see here. Crawford County, that's in the Southwest Wisconsin library system. So if anybody's in Crawford County and would like to contribute to Recollection Wisconsin, we'll put you at the front of the list, that's for sure.
Thanks for the shout out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for pointing that out.
All right. Well, I am absolutely happy to give everybody, 20 minutes back in their day. And please be in touch with me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Please be in touch with me or with Shauna, who knows how to get a hold of me. And Claudia, I would love to talk to you more. We don't have to, make everybody sit here, listen to us talk about your project, but we've worked with Shan before and would love to, make sure that Recollection Wisconsin and Mineral Point Library Archives continue to work together. So that sounds great. Good. All right.
Great. Thank you so much for the great questions. Thank you all for being here today. And you'll see a follow-up email from me, including a survey with feedback if you'd like to give us that. And thanks again for being here and take care.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.